to left, it would roll rather high over the top of these hills. On the reverse slopes, there'd be almost no wind up close. It would probably actually be a little faster rolling down this road. By the time it gets here, again, it's back down to the surface, and the tree line will cause it to buffer a little bit, but there will still be a higher velocity down that road. You must be able to read all the different winds within there in order to understand how that will impact on your bullet's flight. The technique most often used by sniper teams for estimating wind speed is by how it affects things. Firstly, at 3 to 5 miles per hour, you'll start to feel it on your face, but it's important to understand we're talking about thresholds, because by the time it's moving 5 to 8 miles per hour, not only do you feel it on your face, but it's now moving leaves continuously. By 8 to 12 miles per hour, loose paper is blowing on the ground. By 12 to 15 miles per hour, small trees are swaying. And finally, at 17 miles per hour, you'll see whitecaps starting on open water. But be advised, after it hits about 17 to 20 miles per hour, you probably wouldn't even shoot in a crosswind. When you see heat waves shimmering above the Earth's surface, which is present summer and winter, what you're actually looking at is mirage. A lot of long-range shooters don't realize it, but they can exploit the capabilities of their spotting scope to read that mirage to determine the wind speed and direction. You need at least 20 power, but it still works well up to 30 power. Here's how the technique works. Think of this as, let's say, smoke rising from a chimney. When there's no crosswind, that smoke rises straight up. But now you're starting to gently get a crosswind. Just as that smoke would start turning a little bit, the same thing happens to those heat waves. When it's at 60 degrees, it's 1 to 3 mile per hour crosswind. When it's at 45 degrees and you got a stronger wind, it's pushing it down flatter, 4 to 7 miles per hour. And finally, by the time that wind is 8 to 12 miles per hour, that shimmer is visibly horizontal to the earth. Some old-time shooters will claim that they can estimate up to 20 plus miles per hour because they've practiced mirage reading so much that they can read how flat those lines are and determine wind speed. But something else you can do with that mirage is determine the wind direction. And that is, you rotate your spotting scope slowly to the right and slowly to the left, and eventually you'll find a position where it starts broiling and boiling in your field of view. Where you find that, that is the direction the wind is coming from. So how do you compensate for wind? Well, the first and obvious technique is to use the windage knob on your scope and adjust it right or left to compensate. Second technique, if you have a wind that's too high velocity to compensate on the scope, is number one, reduce the distance to 100 yards or less, as police often do, and thereby you minimize the effect so it will not disrupt your shot. But if you don't really want to close with that target, if it's too dangerous for you, dramatically reposition yourself upwind or downwind to neutralize the wind altogether. The sniper team's optics are an integrated family in which the sniper team exploits the capabilities of each device for each situation as it appears. Mini binocs are excellent because you can have them right in your pocket, pull them out fast to investigate a target indicator. These are probably the most often used optics in the team. Binoculars are great for detecting target indicators covering large areas of terrain. When they find a target indicator, it's the spotting scope that becomes the investigative tool by which they determine what it was that the target actually is. And finally, the sniper employs his sniper scope both to spot and to engage targets. Not meant necessarily because it's the best device for detecting targets, but it's going to be up close to his eye anyhow. Now, how do they all work together? First of all, your naked vision scans a wide area until it comes upon a target indicator. Or, to supplement naked vision, you're starting to reduce the field of view but increase magnification. The team employs binoculars. The rifle scope will be the next optical device for having a slightly tighter field of view, but probably with a magnification close to or only slightly greater than the binoculars. And finally, really zooming in on that target, really magnifying it to the most, but with the tightest field of view, will be the spotting scope. most difficult jobs a spotter faces is talking his sniper into a target. That is, the spotter's using binoculars or a spotting scope. He's detected a target, and he has to be able to explain precisely where it is to the sniper, who's also looking through a scope. Let's take that hillside, for example. Let's pretend we're going to look for a target up there. Now, one of the techniques for locating such a target is called the clock system. That is, where you are, where we are right now, is at 6 o'clock. The target is at 12. Now, that star in the center, that's wherever we find a landmark to talk from. If you want to direct him away from this line directly between you and the target, you say, look to the 3 or the 9, or it could be the 7 or the 2, whatever. That's one technique. Another technique is to look within that field of view for what I call a yardstick. You look for some standard distance that you can say 3 lengths right or left. For example, let's say the width or half the width of that open meadowland at the top of the hill. Another thing to look for is a landmark that you can use as a reference point. You can see that power pylon. If you're at high magnification, you can see directly up from that power pylon where it hits the middle of the first grassy meadow, there's a lone tree stump. I could say half the distance from that lone tree stump to the edge of the trees on the left. Voila. Or I can say the width of my thumb, the width of 2 fingers, the width of a fist. Use your imagination. But practicing these during training will hone you so that as quickly as you detect a target, you can say 3 thumbs left, twice the length of that fence line, and boom, the sniper's right on that target. To be effective, a sniper team needs to understand the pros and cons of an assortment of camouflage colors and patterns. Looking first at these desert patterns, this plain tan is fine if you highlight it a little bit. This was our original Desert Storm pattern. It was found to be a little bit too contrasting. That's why it's been rendered obsolete by the newer desert pattern. You know, that's a little mellower and blends together. Next, if we'll look at the winter patterns, ask yourself, where have you seen that much brown with snow on the ground? I think that's for catching fishermen rather than fish. West German pattern just above it, excellent for pine country. Next to it, to the left, is a U.S. winter over white that I've highlighted a little bit to add some late winter streaks of gray. Coming down, we've got 2 very popular police patterns here. Problem for sniping is that silhouettes you very clearly. It's okay for an entry team where you want to intimidate a foe, never for a sniper. All you've done is define the target for a bad guy. Same with this. This is inappropriate. In fact, originally the manufacturer called this pattern snowflage, not urban camouflage. It's very dangerous. It highlights you. Here we have a British or Rhodesian pattern. It's fairly good, very modeled, very irregular. Now we're going to look at some civilian patterns in the background here. All of these would work in northern woodlands. You notice this one over on the right is a little more brown, would lend itself perhaps to mountain country or desert. Those are both realtree. The realtree green would lend itself better to northern woods. We've got mossy oak and tree bark. Those are decent. We've got 2 colors of mirage. Mirage fall, mirage spring. The last 2 military patterns to look at is the famous from Vietnam tiger stripe. Problem, it's polarized. Shadows in the woods, if they're running in the opposite direction, will highlight you. You want to blend in, not contrast what's around you. This is a very nice uniform. It's the Desert Night developed for Desert Storm. It will confuse an enemy's IR attempt to illuminate you in the dark. But other than that, it is not as good as the best overall pattern, which is the American Woodland BDU. For all purpose, it's hard to beat this pattern. It's modeled, it's multicolored, it does not highlight you, it breaks you up sufficiently. You add a little bit of coloration, a little bit of natural camouflage to this, this is probably the most effective pattern you can use.